This week, I'm going to have a look at the uncompressed and compressed RAW files from the Sony a7R II and the a7 III. On the last few versions of the Sony A series cameras, they've given us the option of uncompressed and compressed RAW files. I just want to see what the difference is between these two and if it's worth having twice the amount of memory for all of the shots that you take. As a photographer, when I hear the word compressed file, I always think of pixelated small images. But what is the difference between uncompressed and compressed RAW files from a Sony camera? Well, for one, the size is completely different. The uncompressed file is twice the size of a compressed file. One other thing to note is that they have a different RAW logo, which I didn't realize until doing this video. When you shoot in RAW uncompressed, the logo on the preview file looks like this. And when you shoot a compressed RAW file, the logo looks like this. If you want to have a look at the RAW files yourself, I've left a link in the description. You can download all of these files and have a look on your own computer screen and see if you can spot the difference. So let's have a look at the images and see if there's any difference at all. So now I've got some images on my computer. As you can see, I've got my film strip along the bottom. The red ones are the compressed ones. The green ones are the uncompressed ones. So I've got ones of Gaio Pass in Italy. I have some of some nightscapes, and I've got some of some cityscapes. First of all, we'll have a look at Gaio Pass. These aren't framed exactly the same. There were just some shots that I've taken on the a7R that were compressed and the a7 III that were uncompressed. So with a normal exposure, where you get it about right, you don't really notice much difference. I can't tell the difference at all between these two. I have these two, but there's not much point looking at those because they're completely different exposures. So let's go on to the night sky shots. I took this shot of the night sky and these are all on the a7 III. So this is a7 III uncompressed. This is a7 III compressed. When you actually look at them side by side, you don't really notice that much difference. So I overexposed this bit a little bit, and also at 25mm at 15 seconds, I was pushing the boundaries when it came to the 500 rule. So I probably should have shortened my exposure again, but that's something for a different video. So this is uncompressed. And this is compressed. So if we zoom in 4:1, this is uncompressed and this is compressed. Now, again, on 4:1, I can't notice the difference. Saying that, I did expose this correctly for the night sky. So now we're on 4:1 in this bottom left-hand corner. If I switch between the two, again, I can't really notice that much difference. I'll pull the exposure up a bit. Let's go up by 1. Let's go up by 1 again. The noise patterns look very similar and the shot looks very similar. So we've got these ones where I included a bit of the landscape. Well, I've bumped these ones up by 2 stops. Then let's have a look at the ground. They've both got very similar noise patterns. Again, there isn't enough light on the ground to have a proper exposure here. So whatever you do, the noise would be there. But you can see between the two, the noise patterns are exactly the same. Again, if you want to look at these yourself on your computer and zoom in and pixel peep as much as you want, I have them in a link in the description below. So with astrophotography and with normal landscape photography, when you expose it correctly, I can't tell the difference. Next, we're going to have a look at these cityscapes. I bracketed these because of these bright lights in these shots. So I have my uncompressed bracketed shots, 1 stop under, 1 stop over. And then I've got my compressed files. This is 1 stop under and then 1 stop over the exposure that I chose. And then what I've done is I've combined these into a simple HDR image. It's a very basic HDR, but I just wanted to see what the differences were between the two. So this is the uncompressed HDR file. And this is the compressed one. So if we look at them side by side, you can see there's still the same amount of detail in this shot. And this is 4:1. If we switch it to 1:1, it's maybe a bit more chromatic aberration around the edges, but that could be to do with the HDR process. So again, with this cityscape shot, I can't really tell the difference. Next, what I did was a very extreme bracket. I underexposed the shot by 4 stops. I took a shot, this was still underexposed, but then I took a shot 4 stops overexposed. The reason that the middle one is a little bit underexposed is because this one is just clipping around about here. So I didn't want the whole thing to clip, I wanted it just at the limit. So we've got our 4 stops over, our median shot, and then 4 stops under. Now when I balance this out in my develop module, by pushing this one up by +4 on my exposure scale, then I have my middle shot, and then the overexposed shot, which I've brought down by -4 on the exposure slider. The exposures are very similar. And this is where we're going to start to see a difference. So these 3 are the uncompressed raw files. And then these 3 are the compressed raw files. On the underexposed shot, there really is a difference. On the compressed shot, you can see there's almost a red circle around here, and these buildings are quite red as well. On the uncompressed shot, we don't see this at all. So if I zoom in to here, I think, this is where we start to see the difference. On the uncompressed shot, we've still got quite a good gradation in the sky. On the compressed shot, you can see this is really red and patchy. You can see it comes around and it almost follows a circle right in the middle of the shot. Also, if we look at the noise in this part, it's pretty bad in the compressed shot. If we were to bring the exposure up on both of these, then you can really start to see a difference. It's a really strange pattern, but if we switch between the two, this is the uncompressed file, and I've pushed it 5 stops over the exposure that I took it at, and then this is the compressed one. So you can see there's a real difference. With the uncompressed file, I could probably get away with using this. With the compressed file, it's rubbish. I wouldn't be able to use this at all. With the shots that I overexposed, I've now brought the exposure on the slider back up by 2 stops to give it a bit better exposure, to have a look at the shot. Again, with these, I can't see that much difference. They look very similar. As for these 2 images that I shared on a Facebook group, I set the challenge to see if anyone could notice the difference between the 2. It was a bit of a trick question because you have JPEG compression and then you have Facebook compression, but my point with these 2 images on sharing them on the Facebook group was that you can't actually tell the difference when you expose the shot properly. When you underexpose the shot a lot, that's when you really see the difference. When I first started out doing this test, I thought there was going to be a stark difference between the 2. But I'm really surprised. I thought the uncompressed files would be so much better, but what I've actually found out is that unless you severely mess up your exposure, there's not going to be much difference at all. I actually couldn't notice the difference between the 2 shots until I pushed it to that extremely underexposed shot. As I've said already, I've got a link in the description to all of these raw files. So if you want to have a look and you want to pixel peep for yourself, download them and have a look at them. And that's about it. I think from now on, if I take some shots where I really have to drop the exposure because there's some really bright lights in the shot, or there's parts where I really don't want to blow out, these ones I'll end up shooting in uncompressed RAW. Everything else where I'm shooting where there's good light, I'll switch it to compressed RAW, and this will save me on space. I know memory is cheap, but when you're shooting 2,000 to 5,000 shots in one photo shoot, space still costs money. Now, if you've spotted anything in the RAW files, or if you've spotted anything different with your camera, leave a comment below. It'll be great to hear your thoughts. As always, if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. And for weekly tutorials, hints and tips in photography and videography, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.